Imagine this scene. It is August 1590 on the low sandy shores of Roanoke Island, off the coast of what would become North Carolina. The morning air is thick with humid heat, the smell of salt marsh, and the dense green silence of an untamed continent. Our main character is John White, a 53-year-old artist and governor who has just returned from England after a 3-year delay. Visualize White, a man driven by a desperate biological directive, stepping off a small wooden boat onto the beach, searching for his daughter, his son-in-law, and his granddaughter, Virginia Dare, the first English child born in the New World. He is the leader of 115 colonists left behind in 1587 to build a strategic technical outpost for the English crown. This is the primary behavioral data point, an entire community left on the edge of a vast, unmapped wilderness, completely dependent on their own isolation protocols for survival. As White walks toward the settlement, the silence becomes an oppressive physical weight. The houses are not destroyed, they are gone. The power dynamic has shifted from a struggling colony to a total, clinical void. The archive is open. The timeline of the Roanoke exclusion begins with a man standing before a perimeter wall that holds nothing but shadows. Technical density. The settlement was engineered using standard Elizabethan defensive layouts, featuring a trench line and a palisade of split pine logs. The 3-year delay in White's return was caused by a geopolitical sabotage, the war with the Spanish Armada, which forced the complete deletion of all civilian shipping routes across the Atlantic, leaving the colony isolated for 36 months without an external resource pipeline. White and his search party advanced toward the center of the abandoned fort. The clinical reconstruction of the site reveals a total technical abandonment, but one that lacks the markers of an execution. There are no signs of a sudden assault, no burnt timbers, no hidden arrowheads in the soil, and no skeletal remains. This is a forensic anomaly. A colony does not disappear without leaving a biological rastro of its end. Imagine White's eyes tracking the perimeter until they stop at one of the massive entry posts of the palisade. Carved into the weathered wood 5 feet above the ground are the capital letters, Croatoan. On another tree near the entrance, the letters CRO are etched. This is the primary behavioral trace of the dossier. Before White left for England, he had established a severe communication protocol. If the colonists were forced to leave the island due to distress, they were to carve a Maltese cross above their destination name. Imagine the intense expressions of the men as they inspect the carvings. There is no cross. The absence of the symbol is a technical indicator that the exclusion was planned and executed under a controlled protocol, not a messy and unsolved slaughter. Technical density. The incisions in the pine wood are analyzed by historical parents regarding depth and tool marking, suggesting the use of standard steel iron axes common among English laborers of period. The height of the text indicates it was carved by an adult standing at an average height of 5 feet 6 inches, utilizing a deliberate blockletter format designed for maximum durability against weathering. The investigation shifts to the perimeter of the fort where John White had buried 3 heavy sea chests containing his personal property, maps, and books before departing for England. Imagine the scene as the search party digs up the soil, only to find that the chests have been completely exhumed and ransacked. This is a critical forensic marker of a territorial clearing. The frames of his books are rotted by water, and his drawings are scattered through the dirt. White notes that the destruction was likely carried out by local native groups who discovered the cache after the colonists left. This informational sabotage proves that the island had been surveyed by external forces shortly after the English presence weakened. The timeline shows that the houses themselves had been systematically dismantled, not burned, a high-level logistical choice that indicates the materials were salvaged for transport. The colonists didn't just vanish into the blue, they packed up their infrastructure. We analyze this as a planned strategic relocation, where the community chose to change its geographical coordinates to escape an unviable resource loop. Technical density. The iron hinges of the chest showed advanced oxidation patterns consistent with exposure to high salinity groundwater after being opened. The selective looting of the chests, where iron tools and metal implements were removed while paper artifacts were discarded, reflects a highly pragmatic evaluation of assets by a non-industrialized group utilizing localized survival logic. To understand the deletion of the Roanoke colony, we must perform an audit of the climate matrix of the late 16th century. Tree-ring data collected from ancient bald cypress trees in the region reveals a severe environmental sabotage. 1587 to 1589 was the period of the most intense drought in the southeastern United States in 800 years. Imagine the agricultural collapse inside the fort. The sandy soil of Roanoke Island, already poor in nutrients, became a desert. The wells turned brackish, and the corn crops withered before they could produce grain. The biological toll of this water deletion would have reached a critical threshold within the first 12 months. The power dynamic between the colony and the environment was totally lopsided. The colonists were facing chronic malnutrition and a failure of their hydration systems. We analyze their departure not as a mystery of the supernatural, but as a mechanical necessity of survival. They had to move to a location with an active freshwater pipeline or face total biological exclusion through starvation. Technical density, dendrochronological analysis utilized samples from the Blackwater rivers of North Carolina, establishing a specialized Palmer Drought Severity Index, PDSI value of -4 for the Roanoke region during the years of the colony's operation. This indicates an extreme, prolonged hydrological deficit capable of lowering the water table below the maximum depth of standard Elizabethan hand-dug wells, which were limited to 8 feet in sandy terrain. The word carved into the post points directly to a specific coordinate, Croatoan Island, now known as Hatteras Island, located 50 miles to the south. This was the home of the Croatoan people, a native group led by Manteo, an ally who had traveled to England with White. This is the first logical vector of the investigation. Imagine John White attempting to steer his ship south to verify the rastro left on the post. But the Atlantic performs its own work of forensic sabotage. A violent summer gale hits the search vessels, snapping their anchor cables and threatening to drive the heavy wooden hulls onto the shifting shoals of Cape Hatteras. Low on fresh water and down to a single anchor, the ships are forced to abandon the search, blowing off course toward the West Indies. This was a catastrophic mechanical and environmental failure that permanently closed the window of discovery. White was forced to return to England without ever setting foot on Croatoan, leaving the 115 souls behind a curtain of blue water and lost time. Technical density, the gale encountered by White's ships, the Hopewell and the Moonlight, generated sea states exceeding level 6 on the modern equivalent scale, with shallow shoal depths of less than 15 feet creating extreme cavitation and risk of grounding for vessels with a draft of 12 feet, making a coastal approach technically impossible without a secondary anchor assembly. What happened to the 115 human components of the Roanoke unit? Historical and modern archaeological audits suggest a process of biological and cultural assimilation. Deprived of food, water, and hope after 3 years of silence from England, the colonists likely split into smaller operational groups. The primary group moved south to Hatteras Island, integrating into the Croatoan community to secure a stable food loop. Imagine the scene over the generation that followed. English clothes wearing out, replaced by animal skins, English words merging with the Algonquian language. This is not a violent deletion, but an osmotic transformation. Decades later, early Jamestown settlers reported finding native children with light hair and blue eyes in the region, a genetic rastro that time could not erase. We analyze the lost colony as a case of structural adaptation, where the identity of the group was sacrificed to preserve the biology of the individuals. The colony wasn't lost. It dissolved into the landscape to avoid extermination. Technical density, population genetics models for small isolated groups indicate that a unit of 115 individuals entering an established population of several thousand will experience a complete phenotypical dilution within 3 generations, leaving subtle morphological markers like irital heterochromia or atypical hair shaft textures as the only physical evidence of admixture. In the 21st century, a new technical audit initiated by the First Colony Foundation utilized John White's original maps to uncover a hidden data point. One of White's watercolor maps, examined under advanced lighting, revealed a patch of paper covering a specific symbol, a defensive fort located 60 miles inland, at the confluence of the Roanoke and Chowan rivers, designated as Site X. Imagine the parents using X-ray fluorescence to look through the paper patch, finding the red and blue outline of a symbol that had been intentionally concealed for 4 centuries, a piece of Elizabethan informational sabotage. Archaeologists digging at Site X found English border pattern pottery and metal tools dating precisely to the late 16th century. This is the physical rastro of the second colonial detachment. When the drought hit, a group of colonists moved inland toward the fertile trade routes of the interior, away from the coastal trap. The map was likely sanitized by the English government to prevent rival nations like Spain from discovering the true coordinates of their survival base. Technical density, X-ray fluorescence, XRF, and infrared reflectography mapped the chemical signature of the iron gall ink beneath the patch, confirming it was applied during the original 1980s mapping phase. The ceramic fragments recovered at Site X were identified via petrographic analysis as Surrey Hampshire borderware, a specific utilitarian earthenware unique to the domestic supply chains used by the Roanoke expeditions. The final minute-by-minute forensic reconstruction of Dossier 27 ends here. 115 lives removed from the historical grid by an unyielding drought and a geopolitical war, leaving nothing but an uncrossed word on a wooden post. The trace left by the Roanoke colonists is a lesson in the severe power of environmental pressure to force the total erasure of a cultural identity. The biological facts are immutable: a settlement packed away, a code carved into pine, and a genetic rastro that blended into the deep green woods of America. The Lost Colony remains the definitive study in frontier vitimology and the limits of early colonial mechanics. Your mind is the final piece of this investigation. Join our community of investigators by clicking the subscribe button. Help us track the traces that the forest and the centuries try to hide. I am your guide through the darkness, and I will return with a new dossier very soon. Keep your mind sharp. Focus on the facts with your eyes closed. And remember, every word carved in wood has a reason, and every silence has a history. This is Mind 74, and we are the keepers of the cold files. The investigation is suspended, but the file remains open. Until next time. Technical density: the Roanoke file represents the earliest application of emergency relocation protocols in Anglo-American history. The permanent deletion of the colony's original institutional structure serves as a baseline text in environmental anthropology for the study of how severe climatic fluctuations can destabilize and absorb early industrialized populations into native ecosystems.